All right, so every year the union budget drops, right? And it feels like this massive 1,000-page document that's just impossible to get through. Super dense, kind of confusing, and honestly, it feels like you need a PhD in economics just to make sense of it. But what if I told you the real story, the most important part, is actually hiding on a single page? Let's go find it.
Yeah, for most of us, looking at the budget is like trying to read a secret code. It just feels like it's written for economists and insiders, you know? And it's so easy to feel overwhelmed, like there's no way to really grasp what it all means for the country. But what if there was a shortcut? A way to slice right through all that complexity and get to the good stuff? A single page that gives you a crystal clear snapshot of the government's entire financial game plan.
Well, guess what? There is. There's one single document that cuts through all the noise and gives you the absolute essentials of the government's finances.
And this is it. Let me introduce you to the hero of our story. It's a document called the Budget at a Glance. Seriously, this one page is your golden ticket to unlocking the government's entire financial plan.
So what is this thing? Well, you can basically think of it as the official government cheat sheet for the whole budget. It's just one page. And it's not some hidden secret. It's right there on the Finance Ministry website for anyone to download. No secret password needed.
Okay, so when you pull up this page, you're going to see 3 columns of numbers, and it's important to know what they are. First, you have the budget estimates. That's the initial plan for the coming year, right? It's the forecast. Then, about 9 months later, you get the revised estimates. This is an update, a more realistic picture of where things are heading. And finally, you have the actuals. This is the real deal, what was actually spent and received in a previous year. So you can see the whole journey, from the plan to the update to the final reality.
All right, you with me? Let's start our little tour of this page. We'll kick things off with the first half, where all the government's money comes from.
So the government basically has 2 main ways of getting money, or receipts as they call it. First, you've got revenue receipts. The easiest way to think about this is like its monthly salary. It's the regular recurring income it can count on. Then you have capital receipts. This is different. This is more like taking out a loan or selling off an asset to raise some cash.
So, what's in that government salary? Well, it's mostly what you'd expect. Taxes, like GST and income tax, plus some non-tax stuff like dividends and profits from public sector companies. But here's the real pro tip. Don't just look at this year's number in isolation. Look at the trend. Are tax collections going up year after year? If they are, that's a really powerful signal that the economy is healthy and growing.
Okay, so we've seen the money coming in. Now let's flip to the other side of the ledger and see where all this money is actually going. And just like with income, there are 2 main kinds of spending. First is revenue expenditure. This is all the day-to-day running costs. Think of it like the government's household bills, paying salaries, pensions, subsidies, that kind of thing. But then you have capital expenditure, and this is really important. This is spending that invests in the future, building things like roads, ports, and machinery, assets that will help the economy grow for years to come.
And this is such a crucial point. While, both types of spending are necessary, a big jump in capital expenditure is seen as a huge positive. Why? Because it means the government is actively investing in the country's future. It's building the capacity for long-term growth.
So, we've got money coming in and we've got money going out. And when the spending is more than the income, well, you get a shortfall. That's what we call a deficit. Let's break down the key deficits you'll see on this page because they tell a really important story. First up, the revenue deficit. Now, this is a very specific number. What it tells you is whether the government's regular income, its salary, remember, is enough to cover its daily bills. If this number is high, it means we're borrowing just to pay for our day-to-day expenses, kind of like using a credit card for groceries.
Next up is the big one, the one you always hear about in the news, the fiscal deficit. This is the grand total. It's the overall gap between everything the government spends and everything it earns. To put it simply, this number tells you the total amount of money the government has to borrow this year. And here's a little pro tip. Compare this number to the revenue deficit we just talked about. That gives you a quick snapshot of how much of our total borrowing is just going to cover daily bills. It's a really quick check on the country's financial health.
And finally, there's the primary deficit. Now this one's a little more technical, but it's super insightful. You take the fiscal deficit and you subtract the interest payments on all our old loans. What's left tells you how much the government needs to borrow just for this year's spending without all the baggage of past debt. It's a cleaner look at the current situation.
Okay, we've looked at income, we've looked at spending, we've looked at the shortfalls. But all of this, it all builds up to one single, incredibly powerful question that this one-page document helps us answer.
And that question is this: where is all that borrowed money, that big fiscal deficit number, actually going? Are we using it for something productive, or are we just using it to cover our day-to-day bills? You see, borrowed money can really have two different fates. On one hand, if it's being used to pay for daily running costs, that's the revenue expenditure. That's kind of like taking out a personal loan to pay your electricity bill. It's not a great sign. It's a sign of financial stress. But on the other hand, if that borrowed money is being used for capital expenditure, to build a new highway or a new port, well, that's an investment. That's something that's going to boost our GDP and generate returns for years and years to come.
And that, right there, is the ultimate insight. By looking at that one single page, you can now ask the most important question of any budget. As a country, are we borrowing money simply to consume today, or are we borrowing to create assets for tomorrow? And now you know exactly where to find the answer.